And we're going to talk about Graeme Smith. We're going to talk about what has happened, why he was found not guilty. We're going to read the explainer from Click Info for Fidos Munda, put together a great explainer on why. We are going to read some of the main points of that on the show as well for you guys, so you guys can get an understanding of what has really gone down over here in this particular case. If you are new to this channel, though, and if this is the first time that you're joining us, please subscribe to the channel. Please click that notification bell for all future videos. I know that a lot of people might not know that we are doing this particular show, so please go out there and tell everybody to come join if they want to find out what is really happening in the saga and what has taken place. There's a lot to get through, guys. I'm going to try to get to it as quick as possible, but in a way that you guys still understand everything that has happened. So I need to be very clear on that too. What you also have to do now is subscribe to Cricket Fanatics magazine monthly. Every issue is 100% free, straight to your inbox every single month. The link is in the description. Let's get straight into today's episode, guys. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Cricket Fanatics magazine. This is your daily show. I'm your host, Harley Maiden. This is the show where we talk about all the major talking points in South African cricket. Now, this is the one show that we are actually going to be talking about what happened in cricket, a major talking point, something that broke overnight. I was about to just take a nap and go and sleep and put my head down and relax. And when this news broke online, so we got the press release from Cricket South Africa, and I tried to put it up immediately. So what's actually happened with the Graeme Smith situation? So I'm going to put it up on here on the screen for you guys to see. This is what took place. There's a lot that has happened because Smith was obviously, this was obviously done by Fidos Munda. She put together the explainer of why he was really cleared. The arbitrators did find flaws in CSA Director of Cricket's decisions, but none that established race-based bias against him. Okay, so CSA has cleared former Director of Cricket Graeme Smith of all three charges of racial discriminatory behavior, which came up for discussion during the Social Justice Nation Building (SJN) report's tentative findings. The SJN report didn't provide definite conclusions, but flagged three incidences where Smith's conduct was potentially prejudicial, and these were subsequently tested at the independent arbitration last month. Now, after Smith has cleared on all counts, CSA is required to pay his legal costs. Here we examine each of the issues considered by the arbitrator. There was the Tami Solikile non-selection, which happened in 2012, where Tami Solikile obviously spoke about him not being selected. He thought he should have been the successor to Mark Boucher as the test wicketkeeper. But in the end, they opted for Abe de Villiers before they took Quentin de Kock in 2014. And this was after Abe de Villiers spoke about his back hurting and he doesn't want to be a keeper while Mark Boucher was still keeper. And then after that, he said yes, and then to being keeper in that period where Sami Solikere could have been it. He thought his exclusion showed clear signs of systemic racism and pointed the finger at CSA with Smith, who was obviously the main perpetrator of this now, of course. Now, they needed to obviously look at the situation. They heard evidence from Solikile Smith, and who also provided written affidavits from former selectors and conveners, Andrew Hudson, as well as Linda Zondi. Solikile testified that when he was contracted in 2012, Hudson told him he was unlikely to play against England and Australia that year, but could or would play in the home series against New Zealand in 2013. Solikile claimed that Hudson gave him a guarantee of a place in the 11 in the New Zealand series. Hudson said he only told Solikile it was likely he would play. Arbitrators found that after being contracted, Solikile had a reasonable expectation of being selected at least in the New Zealand series. However, the dynamics of the South Africa test team changed when Boucher was injured ahead of the first test against England, prompting an early retirement. Solekile was not in the squad at the time, and de Villiers was the backup keeper. Solekile was then called up to the squad as cover for de Villiers, but not as the replacement for Boucher. Hudson explained the selection decision to not pick Solekile, saying de Villiers gave the team the X factor and allowed us, the selectors, to select an extra batter at number 7. Smith concurred. Smith recalled then coach Gary Kirsten discussing the matter with him. As a result, Solekile did not play. In that instance, the arbitrators concluded that there is no direct evidence concerning the England tour that Mr. Smith actively influenced the selectors to exclude Mr. Solekile from the playing 11. Now, from if you hear it from that perspective, there is no foul play. It doesn't sound like there's any foul play in that situation because there were multiple people discussing the reasons from a cricketing perspective at the time. So Solekile didn't get in 11 on the tour for Australia that followed, and then the New Zealand series at home. Hudson explained this was because the selection committee sought to retain the unquestionable momentum the team had created. Though Smith said he was not consulted about the selection for the New Zealand series, the arbitrators noted that the selection panel was instructed to have due regard to the views of the captain, who is entitled to freely and strongly indicate his preferences in selection. And Smith was likely to have been consulted in the same way he had been for previous tours. CSA argued that Smith used his influence to exclude Solekile from selection, and one of the bases for this exclusion was Solekile's race. But the arbitrators found that even though Smith did influence the selectors and favored a strategy that left no room for Mr. Solekile, there was no evidence that race played a role in the discussion and the decisions. The arbitrators therefore determined that it was not a race-based cricketing reason not to select Mr. Solekile, but said it was impossible not to be sympathetic to Solekile, who was never given the chance to prove his worth. So that was the occasion with Solekile. I mean, I did a whole show on this alone, on this whole thing, when it comes to Solekile. I spoke about it in depth, and I spoke about it when it actually happened. So I'm going to go through this obviously more in detail right now, to give you guys an understanding of actually what's going down. It's been a hectic couple of a hectic night and hectic day, guys, because a lot of people were actually affected by this news in different ways, and it's understandable that that is the case. I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to go on to Boucher's appointment. That was another thing that he was accused of, that he was showing favoritism towards Boucher over Nkwe. So let's read what Vidos had to say in this particular article. Boucher was appointed head coach of the men's national team in December 2019, shortly after Smith had accepted the DOC's role. Boucher displaced Enoch Nkwe, who was acting team director, the senior most member of the support staff, for South Africa's tour to India in 2019. Nkwe was named Boucher's assistant and served in the capacity until August last year before resigning. The arbitrators had to ask how and why Smith appointed Boucher and whether there was a direct or indirect discrimination against Nkwe in the process. They had to consider the suitability of Boucher and Nkwe for the position, as well as CSA's procedure for appointing a national coach. The arbitration award noted that both Boucher and Nkwe were able coaches, and differences lay in their qualifications and experience. While Boucher had over a decade of international playing experience, Nkwe had limited international experience. He never played for South Africa, but held level 4 coaching certificate. Boucher did not. CSA did not have a consistent practice of requiring coaches to hold a level 4 certification, but had previously in advertisements called it advantageous. So that's new information that we didn't know. We thought, all of us actually thought, that you needed a level 4 to be coach. That was one of the criteria. But obviously, that's not the case according to this particular article. Some previous coaches like Russell Domingue had the qualification. Others like Kirsten did not. There was no job advertisement placed at the time of Boucher's appointment. Now that clears everything up for us, because we were under the impression that that was part of the reason why it was unfair. But if it wasn't a major issue and it wasn't consistent in the past, then we shouldn't have an issue with that for this particular role. When it came to appointing the new national coach, Smith said while testifying that the 2019 World Cup South Africa were the first team to be knocked out and returned the worst tournament performance in their history. And the result of the India tour, where they drew the T20I series 1-1 and lost the test 3-0, had led to him concluding that the team needed someone that had extensive experience in dealing with conditions, with the pressures that come with the international game. He did not conduct a formal process for a comparative evaluation between Boucher and Nkwe. At the same time, Smith did not know exactly how long Mr. Nkwe had played domestic cricket or how long he had been a professional coach, and had a month prior told CSA President Chris Nzani that he had identified Boucher as the main man to take over the role. In essence, Smith was not choosing between Boucher and Nkwe because the evidence suggested that he always preferred Mr. Nkwe for the position of assistant coach and Boucher for head coach, as within the scope of his role as DOC. When Smith was unveiled as the DOC, he met Boucher and Nkwe to offer them the respective positions and appointed other staff, including Charles Langeveld as bowling coach, Justin Ontong as fielding coach, and Linda Zonde as convener of selectors. At the hearing, CSA criticized Smith's actions and said he should have made interim appointments first. Smith countered by saying he had been given a directive to make a long-term appointment. That's weird that they would say he had to appoint interims first. That doesn't make any sense. The arbitrators found that the manner in which these appointments were made was clearly undesirable, as the jobs were never advertised and were certainly flaws in the way that Mark Boucher was appointed. But they reasoned they do not establish unfair racial discrimination by Mr. Smith against Mr. Nkwe. They found that Smith appointed the person he thought was best placed to coach the national team at the time. He honestly wanted the Proteas to succeed and honestly believed that Mr. Boucher was most likely to achieve that. We do not believe that he had evidence to suggest that he would have consciously appointed someone he thought was not the best person for the job because of their race. The arbitration award read, working with the Black CSA leadership, perhaps the lightest of the charges was Smith was racially biased against black leadership in CSA because of an allegation that was not willing to report to former CEO Tabang Moreau. The arbitrators found that CSA's arguments fell flat in light of Smith's willingness to report to the previous board, which had 7 out of 9 black directors. Subsequently to the black interim board chair, Judge Zach Yacob, a newly appointed black board chair, Lawson Naidu, and to work alongside the black CEO, Poletse Moseke. Moseke testified that Smith had worked well with all of the black leaders of CSA and that he had not seen and experienced any racial bias by Smith towards him or other members of black CSA management. Smith was in fact prepared to report to Monroe when he began as DOC, but Monroe was suspended at the time. Wow, hectic read, long read, a lot to cover over there. And as you guys hear, he was obviously cleared of all charges. There was no way for them to be able to prove that there was any racism involved, and that's what they have concluded. Then we put out a article as well, guys, with Graeme Smith. We gave a statement to everybody, which we're going to put up for you now. The main headline was, "I'm grateful that my name has been finally cleared." So this is what Graeme Smith had to say after everything had happened. "I'm grateful that my name has finally been cleared. I've always given South African cricket my utmost as a player, captain, administrator of the last 20 years. So to hear these baseless allegations of racism being made has been extremely difficult for both me and my family. It has been exhausting and distracting, not least because South African cricket has also been going through a well-publicized rebuilding process, which has required a lot of attention. I'm just pleased that we now have gone through a robust arbitration process before independent objective arbitrators, and I have been completely vindicated." So that's it, guys. That's it. And then he had his lawyer that obviously spoke, which is not, I don't think that's really necessarily important to go through. You guys can go on the site, cricketfanaticsmag.com, of course, to go see that. But ultimately, I'm glad that I stuck to my guns from the beginning and that I didn't get drawn in, or we didn't get drawn in. I think all of us didn't on this channel and part of this family. We didn't get drawn into the speculation. I maintained a strict rule and I'm going to remain sticking to that rule going forward. I will not um, say anything about anybody or accuse anybody of anything until it's been proven, or it's been, or it's gone through a process. Because we've seen a lot of crazy things in this world where people have been accused of things that is not true, and it has destroyed their lives completely. And this could have been an instance like that, where someone has been falsely accused of racism. Now, I'm going to continue with that going forward on this channel, and I hope you guys respect that, as that we will only talk about it when the facts come. Now, I'm going to start talking about the Tsolekile situation. Unfortunately, and this is something that Dr. Musaji actually raised in his SJN hearing, it's very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult to prove someone is racist without clear-cut evidence of the person saying something directly, or saying something racist to you. And what has happened is, it's possible for there to be unconscious bias when it comes to people from certain race. And those are the type of things that we can't necessarily prove, but we might, as people of color, we might come across those type of things, and we don't understand why. Like, for example, you might get treated differently, and you don't know the reason why, and someone else from a different color will be treated correct. So it's crazy that it's difficult to prove that. Now, with Boucher's case, he was accused of specific things said, direct racism, of racial slurs and things like that within a song that he was accused of. So I think it's a little bit more tricky to obviously explain that, and explain that away, because it's actually evidence that there was obviously agreement that there was a song like that was sung, and that's a totally different case to what this was. So it's very difficult to prove that that particular case was because of the race, and it wasn't about the cricketing ability. So it was. Those things do happen in cricket, where there is a little bit of unconscious bias that I've witnessed myself as well. Just scoping around and looking around the country at certain unions, etc. There seems to be sometimes, in certain occasions, in certain cricket fraternities in the country, and that doesn't necessarily mean domestic cricket, Division 1, Division 2. I'm talking about all around the country, school level, junior level, wherever the case may be. There is some sort of unconscious bias towards players of color, and particularly Black African players, cricket players, because they had a major disadvantage when it comes to playing cricket in the country. They started 100 years after, to actually play the sport fairly. So, yeah, that's the situation. So Graeme Smith has been cleared. We don't know. His contract is up his DOC, so we don't know if they're going to approach him again for another position. And those things will obviously reveal itself very soon. I think they'll probably go through the Mark Boucher situation first, clear that up first before they move on and decide what's going to be happening with regards to that. So let's see what happens going forward. Khalid, what's going to happen with people like Lawson Naidu now? I mean, surely heads must roll now. They basically bash Smith in the media without any facts. Look, I don't actually think that they bashed him in the media necessarily. I think they needed to do what they needed to do based on the allegations made. And generally speaking, with cases like this, you are guilty until proven innocent. I guess that is basically the notion that people kind of go with such sensitive topics. Because there's a lot of cases where there is racism involved that gets brushed under the carpet, or people are scared to come up and speak about it. And that's what we saw at the SJN. There was a lot of players that might have felt racism towards them, and they did not want to speak up, or people in the industry that didn't want to speak about it because it's the past and they want to leave it there, and they don't want to maybe dig up old wounds, etc. Sami Solekile decided to take it on. It obviously didn't help him the fact that he had all of those bans and match fixing bans and all of these things behind him either. But I think what got it so much attention, his story, was because he went on Robert Marawa's show, and that interview kind of blew up completely, and I think that put a lot of um, spotlight on the whole issue and his story. So I think they were almost forced into making a decision. What I do respect them for is that yes, they could have easily said, "You look here, you guys are suspended until you are proven innocent," and they didn't do that. So CSA has to get some sort of credit for actually allowing this to go through a process, regardless of what they said and what they did. Um, they they went through a process and did not suspend them because of the allegations. Um, and these allegations, I think people are blaming it on the allegations on CSA. Like Lorenzo, I think you're saying, yes, Smith can definitely open up a defamation case against CSA and will be hammered in court. But I don't think that it's CSA necessarily, that CSA are not the ones that made the allegations. They created the SJN to clear up certain issues within South Africa. And Sami Solekile came forward. He could actually, what could happen is he could actually sue Sami Solekile for defamation, because he's the one that made the accusations about him. CSA had to follow up. When accusations as strongly as those are made, you can't just leave it and just say, "Oh, we're going to distrust Smith and what, that he didn't do anything wrong." You have to go through the process. You can't just leave it. Imagine if it's like if someone was racist to you, and it's going to be at your work, and you go to your to the and maybe the person that was racist to you is friends with the CEO, and you go and you complain to HR, and they say, "No, but um, I don't believe that the person would have said that. It's him, so I doubt he would have said anything." And then they sweep it under the rug. You would be really pissed off about it. You wouldn't be okay with that happening. You would obviously be upset about that. So CSA had to do that. CSA had to go through the process and allow it to be investigated. I felt that they did the right thing in that regard, to allow that to go through the process. And that's what I said at the beginning. You can't just expect them to just sweep it under the rug and just leave it. That was very strong allegations, regardless of who said it. It's strong allegations. So they needed to do it in the right way. And I felt that they did it in the right way. They didn't suspend Smith, which they could have done. They didn't suspend Boucher, which they could have done. They could have appointed an interim coach. They could have suspended Boucher. They could have suspended Graeme until the hearing was over, but they didn't. So somewhat, they were kind of in his corner in a way, in that, from that perspective, because they didn't just believe the allegations and put it out there. So it was always reported. And I think that's where we as fans need to be smart with the way we read, and not be gullible with certain things and follow narratives online, etc., and go with the flow of what is said on Twitter. What should happen is we should be very smart about the way we look at things. Consistently, reports were saying accused, accused, accused. It wasn't necessarily guilty of. It was accused for. So it was never, none of the reports that I've read per se actually said that Graeme Smith was racist. There was accusations about him, and that it needed to go through the right process, especially because it happened through the SJN, where there were lawyers involved and legal things involved. They couldn't just work it out internally. They needed to, because of that process, they needed to go through the full process. And that was going to happen. And I think that we needed that in South Africa. We needed that process in South Africa. So that was something that needed to happen. Lauren saying true, but allow it to go through the process without any concrete proof, though. I'm just going by hearsay. No, so what happened was, in that occasion, is that was exactly what the issue was about. It was supposed to be conversations about things that have taken place. Written affidavits, sworn affidavits, where people have sworn by oath that what the things that they're bringing forward is true. The evidence was it's difficult because the evidence is inexperienced. How can you prove it? So, Lawrence, how would you have proven it in that day and age? in that era, 2012, in that era when Thomas Solikili was a kid, a child, facing the things that he said he faced, there was no way to prove those things. Um, there's no way that you can physically prove that he was racist to me. Like, it's very difficult to prove that. Like, I mean, how many times do people face prejudice? I mean, I'll tell you a funny story, and I'm not going to mention names and get people into trouble, but I just received, I just went into a pharmacy. It was in a very affluent area. I went into a pharmacy. I was extremely sick, and I needed to get medication. And I was wearing a mask. I was wearing a beanie. I was cold. My chest was tight. I wore a hoodie. I was in like a like a pajama pants, and I walked into the pharmacy, and everyone around, not everybody, but a lot of the people were looking at me funny. Um, Particularly white employers were looking at me funny, and I was like, okay, like they gave me weird looks, and like, and one of the ladies came up to me and they're like, "Can I help you, sir?" And I was like, "No, I'm fine, thank you." And then they said, "Okay." And then they came back again afterwards, 5 minutes later, asking me, "Are you sure we can't help you, sir?" So I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm just looking for what I'm looking for. I need to have a look over here at all the products. I want to see which one I want to buy." Okay. But they never took their eyes off me. And I went to the thing, and when I went to the counter and I gave it, and I gave my medical aid, her whole face changed when she dealt with me afterwards. And I was like, what the hell was that? And I walked out, and I never went to that pharmacy again, because I was like, what just happened? Like, I could feel it. It was weird. And at that point, I wasn't as aware to these type of things, because I never faced it necessarily at that particular time in my life. I never actually faced racism blatantly. There were things that happened that I wasn't 100% sure of, that sometimes you frown and you're like, wait, that was weird. How come that person's getting something over me, but we on the same level? I'm better, and this person's getting certain um what's the word I'm looking for? Getting certain advantages because of it. So there are some things that go through. So it's very difficult for Thomas Solekile, if it was anybody else, to come in and say, "Oh no, he was racist to me." And then even if he does say this is what he said to me, there is no recording. You're not going when someone's racist. It's normally out of I don't know, anger and spur of the moment. You don't expect it, so it's not like you're going to be walking around with a phone recorder in your pocket, like Amber Heard, and wait for someone to and record everything, and then say like, "Hey, I want," and try to trick the person into saying something or doing something that's racist. So the HIN hearings was about experiences and things that they've witnessed in their life. And the reason why it happened is because it wasn't the only person that said something, that said they faced something like that. It was obviously more than one case that pointed towards it throughout the HIN. So they had to go through the process, which I think they did correctly. At least Smithy won now, so we can keep his head high and move on. Tommy is what it is, because Tommy's band didn't help much. It's almost impossible to prove that, to be honest. Exactly. Exactly. It's almost impossible to prove that, exactly. So even though you feel a certain, and it's going to be based on a feeling of a certain way, you're going to feel a certain way or feel uncomfortable. That feeling, you won't understand until you experience it. That feeling is not a nice feeling to have. And like there's so many occasions. I was at junior school, and one of my friends, or one of my classmates, she came into the classroom, and she just fell apart and started crying. And I asked her what is wrong, and she was actually adopted. She had two white parents. She was adopted. She was a black African girl, and she came in there and she started crying. And we asked her like, "What is going on? What is wrong? Everything okay?" And then she eventually got it out to the teacher, and the teacher told us that, with her permission, of course, because she couldn't really speak about it. She was young. I mean, we were very young at the time. I mean, we must have been like 11, 12 years old, and we were all youngsters, not understanding what's going on. And they said no, she was called bad names when she was at Cavendish, and a lady called her a bad name in the line, telling her she's blocking the line at Cavendish to go to the tickets, and she doesn't even drive, and she called her bad name, and she didn't think that the parents were in front. She called her the K word, and she didn't know that the parents were in front, and the parents heard her and turned around, and it was a massive thing. And I think they were almost going to actually sue the lady, but they just let it go after a while. So things like that happen in South Africa, and we just don't know about it, and we just brush it under the carpet, and we forget about it, And I don't think and I think that's a good step that the SJN did, is they allowed people to tell their stories, whether the stories were true, whether the stories weren't true. That's up to that person that's lying under oath, because why are you lying under oath? You shouldn't be. But if you do, then you must obviously face the repercussions of that. So what I think happened over here in this situation is there was no way for CSA or the arbitrators to prove that Graeme Smith was racist in these occasions, in those cases. There was no way of proving it. Whether he was or whether he wasn't, he would only know. But we need to take this situation as it is. We can't still be running with that bias. I feel that we need to understand that, look here, he was proven guilty. I mean, he was proven innocent, sorry. So we have to go with that. That was what came out of the SJN. And if you can't trust the system, then we're never going to come right. So in this particular instance, the system worked in Graeme Smith's favor, and he came through, and we need to respect that, and we need to move on from it. So yeah, I'm glad that he was cleared, because that's a hero of South African cricket. We didn't really want to see that happen to someone that was a former captain, that was so well respected in South African cricket. If he was proven guilty, wow, guys, it would have been heartbreaking. I mean, even if he was guilty, it would have still been heartbreaking for fans, for a guy that we've always looked up to.